let's tell this story. So the idea of the book is to tell the story of the Hindi film industry through the eyes of its biggest filmmaker. These days, you will find that many of the directors do not have that much longevity. They make two big films, three big films, then they are not able to sustain that run of hits like Mr. Ghai did over a quarter of a century. Now you have to give what a family will enjoy together. There is this legend in the film industry about Zanjeer, that Salim Javed wrote a story and a string of actors refused to act in it.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. Joining me today is journalist and author Suveen Sinha, who has written this incredibly fascinating book. In fact, it's memoir of Subhash Ghai, the showman, the ultimate showman of Hindi cinema after Raj Kapoor. Welcome to the show, Mr. Sinha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I can't tell you how happy I am to see the book in your hands because this is truly a labor of love.
Right.
I grew up watching and enjoying Mr. Ghai's movies, so it was truly a dream come true to work with him on the book, and I got a chance to live those movies with
Hmm.
him. So it was just an incredible experience. So thank you for having me here. It's great to be talking about the book.
Thank you. So, just by way of introduction, Suveen, of course, is an author and journalist. His previous two books include a book on, the memoirs of a civil servant turned entrepreneur. That was on Jagdish Khattar of Maruti,
Yes.
and another book called The Tip of the Iceberg that was subtitled The Unknown Truth Behind India's Startups. And this one, as I mentioned, is called Karma's Child. The story of Indian cinema's ultimate showman is the memoir of Subhash Ghai, and which is chosen to write in the third person. So, Suveen, would you tell me, what prompted this decision to sort of uh, tell it? Normally, a memoir is told through the first person of the writer, but here, we have
Yes.
a brief introduction by Mr. Ghai, and then the entire book, more or less, is told through a third person voice that's yours.
Yes. So the idea, Anjum, was to capture the story and evolution of the Hindi film industry. See, the Hindi film industry in its glorious chaos was fascinating. It's still fascinating. But now some corporatization has happened, some structure has come, some MBAs wearing suits and ties have come, but it remains the Hindi film industry. But back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was even more fascinating because there was a bit less of structure.
Mhm.
But the relative lack of structure made enormous creativity possible. The kind of creativity that was going on is unimaginable. So the
Mhm.
idea of the book is to tell the story of the Hindi film industry through the eyes of its biggest filmmaker. And Mr. Subhash Ghai was the biggest filmmaker from the middle of the 1970s when Kalicharan came out to the end of the century. He gave a string of hits, blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster. These days, you will find that many of the directors do not have that much longevity. They make two big films, three big films, then they are not able to sustain that run of hits like Mr. Ghai did over a quarter of a century. Uh,
Hmm.
and he redefined Hindi cinema in many way. In fact, when we talk about the title of the book, as I'm sure you would like to ask, we will
Yeah.
come to how he fought piracy by the things that he did with karma.
Right, right. No, that is another interesting aspect of the book and his story. So you title is of course Karma's Child. So is that some kind of a play on his one of his most successful films, but also the
Yes.
fact that he does not believe in destiny. But
Yes.
there's this also. Let me also bring it here that little bit about that Taqdeer versus Tadbir debate that that he was a part of during his early years of struggle, and this was, I think, something that Javed Akhtar, the lyricist, was also part of. So, if you could tell us a little bit about the title and the story behind
Yes. So one very important thing about Mr. Ghai was that he always believed that he could shape his own destiny
Hmm.
through karma, which is with his
Action.
deeds.
Hmm.
And in fact, it gets encapsulated in a song from Vidhata where Dilip Kumar and Shammi Kapoor, they are both engine drivers. And there is a very well-known song, Haathon ki Chand Lakiron ka, Ye Khel Hai Bas Takdeeron ka. That's what Shammi Kapoor's character sings. And Mr.
Hmm.
Dilip Kumar's character says it's all about tadbir, which is what you do through the dint of your own efforts and merit that you can shape your destiny. But
Right.
Mr. Ghai actually did that with the movie Karma. Karma came at a time when the Hindi movie industry was being run over by video piracy. People
Hmm.
were watching movies on a tiny screen in little video parlors. Nobody was going to theaters. So
Hmm.
when Mr. Ghai released Karma, he personally visited many of the marquee cinema halls of the day. He
Right.
refurbished cinema halls and he contributed money towards the refurbishment, doing up the seats, environment, toilets, and most importantly, the sound system. Because Karma had this multi track sound system that had not been heard in India before. And in fact, he does a very, very clever thing. If you happen to rewatch Karma, you will see that when the movie begins, it begins on the frame that you see is very small, like a video screen, and then it grows bigger and bigger and bigger. So it gives the viewer the sense of the difference between a small video screen and a large cinema screen, and then the multi-track sound kicks in like a clap of thunder, and the title is flashed on the screen.
Hmm.
So Karma brought viewers back to cinema halls. So of course it's one of his more famous movies, but also it encapsulates the concept of karma, what you do. Mr. Ghai is a product of the things he has done. So it just clicked, we were just discussing and said, why not Karma's Child? And it seemed to capture the essence of the entire story. So there it is, Karma's Child.
Right. And let me also take you a little back in time and to the days in Delhi, and of course, then from Delhi he goes on to study in Haryana, and and there's this little bit about his early differences with his father that and then his attempt at suicide, which of course was a failed
Yes.
attempt. And, uh, how did that sort of trigger him to prove to his father that he would end up eventually making something out of his life?
Yeah, interesting that you bring that up because the movie, sorry, I'm saying it movie because the book is like a movie to me. The book
Right.
begins with his attempt to die by suicide, and he
Hmm.
drinks this dried out copper sulfate, which was easily available those days. And then he's lying in hospital bed, and his father is sitting there, who's obviously relieved that he's safe, but also very angry with him and saying that no, you will never amount to anything. Then Mr. Ghai made a promise to himself that someday I will become something. I think
Right.
that was the turning point when he decided to take the reins of his own destiny in his own hands. And he comes from a distraught family, in the sense that in those days divorce was an unheard of thing. But his parents got divorced when he was still a child, living separately. And Mr. Ghai not only loved his mother, he was devoted to his mother.
Hmm.
But he was no longer living his mother. That really affected him a lot. He calls his mother his guru as well. And many of the storytelling that he has learned was from his mother, because the mother used to narrate the stories of the epics and other interesting stories from our culture. The mother has had a profound impact on him. But in that strife, in those difficulties, he did not allow adversity to put him down. He decided that I'm going to take it on, and then he rose and rose and rose, and here we are.
Right. Right. And then in these past years, of course, besides making films, he's of course now the managing director of Mukta Arts, the production company that he established somewhere along the way. Then he's the founder chairman of Whistling Woods International. Of course, everybody knows that the premier film institute of India that he started in 2006, I believe. And this brings me to another question, Suveen, about his early struggles and his after FTII, that is, that you write somewhere in the book that most of his classmates, I think, had made it big in their lives. Someone was a successful actor, or somebody was doing very well in their lives. But uh, Mr. Ghai, on the other hand, seemed to be, because he wanted to be an actor, and that nearly a decade or so was lost in that pursuit of chasing
Yes.
directors,
Yes.
and in order to be an actor.
Yes. 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 In fact, that decade or so that you mentioned, that was the
Mhm.
period of self-discovery for Mr. Ghai.
Yes.
And he now understands it. See, he did what anyone was doing, which is to come out of FTII and try to become an actor. But Mr. Ghai, from the beginning, was a filmmaker who was trying to be an actor.
Right.
So all the time there was a conflict going on, and thank you for reading the book before this, Anjum. It's very good to speak to you because you already know what is there in the book, so I don't have to recap that. But so you would have seen that on many occasions when he's trying to enact a scene,
Hmm.
he is telling himself, "What am I doing? This
Yeah.
scene can be acted out differently. It can be written differently. It can become a much better scene." But every time
Absolutely.
he's being told by the writer, by the dialogue writer, and the director that you do what you're told.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
Mr. Ghai, in his college days only, had become a playwright as well as a director of plays. He had
That was
this thing in
what.
his head. Yes,
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
Now, when he was trying to make it as an actor, he was a filmmaker trying to become an actor who was all the time feeling that this scene, this song, this movie can actually be much better. And
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
conflict never left him. I think that is what did not really allow him to flower as an actor because all the time he was thinking this can be different, this can be
Hmm.
better. And he was not being allowed to express himself. So, first from acting, he switched to writing, which allowed him to give some expression to his creativity. And he wrote some very successful movies, including some that Raj Kapoor loved to act in,
Hmm.
and etc. But when he really became a director, you know,
Right.
all of us have seen many first movies made by directors. Some of
Hmm.
them are remarkable. You think of Quentin Tarantino and you think of Reservoir Dogs, etc. Right,
Right.
and there are other examples. But when
Hmm.
Mr. Ghai became director with Kalicharan, it was
Hmm.
like he was already a fully formed director. He was not a work in progress. He was not
Right.
learning. He was
Hmm.
already a director. He just got the chance to
Hmm.
express himself as a director. In fact, even if you watch Kalicharan now, what, nearly 50 years later, I watch it now and I can't tell you how much I enjoy it. The film is
Hmm.
just complete in itself, in its storytelling. Can you imagine? We are talking
Hmm.
about the mid 70s, 76 or so now. The
Right.
lead actor is actually a single father.
Hmm. Hmm.
These things did not happen at that time. Heroes, romance heroines, they sang songs, and the film ended with they getting together. Here, the
Hmm.
film starts with Shatrughan Sinha, the police officer. He's a father of two children, and his wife is not in the picture. He is a widower who is a father of two children and bringing them up, and a police officer. Very,
Right.
very unusual characterization. And then we
Yeah.
have this criminal, foul mouthed, badly behaved, like a raging bull, who has to take the place of the police officer. In fact, in many ways,
Hmm.
Kalicharan was a precursor to Dawn. Because what
Right.
happens in Dawn? One person takes the place of another. But in
Hmm.
Dawn, a simpleton takes the place of a criminal. In
Right.
Kalicharan, a criminal takes the place of a police officer. But it is that placing one person in the position of a lookalike and then the story goes forward. It's a
Right.
remarkable movie. The
Hmm.
songs are in place, the entire narrative is in place. If you look at Danny's character,
Hmm.
the man comes out so strong because he does not have one leg. Here is a man doing action scenes on one leg. Who would have
Right.
thought of it? So Mr. Ghai at the first attempt at director itself was a great director to begin with.
Also, the film Kalicharan itself marked his. You're right that it of course marked his arrival, but also it was a film that he just happened to direct. that it was quite fortuitous that way. That NNCP, when you write how in a party he cracks a joke that, why don't you give it to me to direct? And he asked him, "Are you really serious?" And then he says, "No, I was just joking." And even though he wanted to direct, he did not want to, he wanted to it to fall through and somehow come about, and does not really get rejected or something. So if you could give us a sense of how this film Kalicharan, that is, was more like a writer's film, as you mentioned somewhere, and also the fact that it was also one of those coincidences uh, that just happened along the way.
Yes, yes. So I will take you back to what we discussed initially, that the film industry in those days had this glorious chaos going on all the time,
Yeah,
which made
yeah.
enormous creativity possible. This is the
Hmm.
kind of things that happened. So Kalicharan was actually one of the early stories that Mr. Ghai had written,
Hmm.
but there were no takers for it. There is this legend in the film industry about Zanjeer, that Salim Javed wrote a story and a
Yeah.
string of actors refused to act in it. There is a similar story about Kalicharan also. Mr. Ghai wrote, people rejected it, and then he moved on to writing other things, which became successful. But and this is how how the stars get aligned.
Hmm.
So Mr. NNCP had become a successful producer then, and he had just given a hit film with an unproven director. So his confidence was at a high. And he said, Subhash, I want one more story. Kya hai tumhare paas? So Subhash Ghai was very close to Mr. Sippy's family. In fact, he knew his children very well, and he used to address Mr. Sippy as daddy, just like Mr.
Hmm.
Sippy's own children did. So he said, Daddy,
Right.
mere paas ek story hai, but nobody really wants it.
Hmm.
I have to tell you, many people have rejected it, but here is the story.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in those days, nobody was interested in reading voluminous and bound scripts. A
Right.
lot of the agreements happened over narration. So people will sit in a comfortable room with bolsters and beverages coming, and somebody will narrate the entire story. So Mr. Ghai, being an actor, was great at narrations. He will throw in dialogues and he will dramatize and he will produce sound effects with his mouth, like horses
Hmm.
running and guns getting fired. So he narrated the entire thing, and Mr. Sippy was fascinated. And
Right.
in those days, when someone liked a narration, they did not say good or great or wonderful. They would say hit hai, hit hai, hit hai.
Yeah.
So people said hit hai, hit hai, hit hai. So
Hmm.
Mr. Sippy told him that you direct
Hmm.
the movie exactly as you narrated it. Because Mr.
Right.
Sippy once brought some financiers to Mr. Ghai's house where Mr. Ghai did a similar narration. And they said
Hmm.
hit hai, hit hai, hit hai. So they said now you make the movie exactly as you narrated it. So from narrating it to directing it. And of course,
Right.
all the other obstacles happen, which happens during the making of any movie. Getting the actors
Hmm.
to sign on, unproven director, no track record, no, just the promise. But
Hmm.
Mr. Shatrughan Sinha was a great help. He agreed to act in it, and then they were friends, of course, from the FTII. So
Hmm.
it turned out well.
He was perhaps far more attuned to the kind of films that he eventually ended up making, in a way that he was somebody who understood what would work. He was somebody who had understood the films, and of course was great admirers of films by, say, Ritvik Ghatak, for instance, who he had happened to be he was in touch with at FTII when uh,
Yes.
so that phase of life. And then of course that was also the time when you had FTI graduates coming to FTI, and they had all these fanciful ideas about the world cinema and Godard and Fellini and all that. But here was somebody who actually was more invested in the kind of cinema that perhaps a Bollywood film director would make.
Yes, yes. So Mr. Ghai was a great admirer of some world cinema people also, but
Hmm.
he thought that our cinema was about Bimal Roy.
Right, right.
Our cinema was Raj Kapoor.
Hmm.
Meaning that, our cinema is not festival cinema.
Hmm.
Our cinema is not for people who go and watch it alone. In fact, our cinema, if you look at the most successful movies, is not even only for couples.
Yeah.
Our cinema is for families.
Hmm.
Because going out to a theater and watching a movie is like an event in the lives of many of us, still is. You go out, you eat a bit, you watch a movie. It's an evening out for the family. Now you have to give what a family will enjoy together,
Hmm.
which is what, say, when Bimal Roy made Madhumati, and when Raj Kapoor made all his big blockbusters, entire families would enjoy them. Mr. Ghai wanted to make that kind of cinema. In fact, he calls it a thali. Where there'll be a roti also, and dal also, and rice also, and six different kinds of vegetables, and dessert also, and papad also, and salad also. There is something for everyone. And if you look at his movies from Kalicharan onwards, they are
Hmm.
wholesome entertainment. So that is, he was very clear that that is the kind of movie I'm going to make. There was never a doubt in his mind.
Hmm. And then let's talk a little bit about his friendship with Mr. Sinha and those fascinating episodes that you write about. Briefly, if you could talk a little bit about that, because that gives a sense of how he sort of started out and the kind of you know uh,
Yeah.
people
So,
he worked with initially. Yeah.
you know, if to be very honest with you, the friendship story of Mr. Ghai and Mr. Shatrughan Sinha can be a film in itself.
Wow.
Okay. Because they started out being classmates at FTII. They came to
Hmm.
Bombay to struggle together. Shatrughan Sinha, of course, rose to prominence very, very quickly because Shatrughan Sinha was not he did not have the looks of a conventional Hindi film hero. He did not look like Vishwajit. He did not look like Shammi Kapoor. I'm talking, or Joy Mukherjee. I'm talking about the big stars of the time, or Devanand, the lookers, or Sunil Dutt. So he very quickly found his niche,
Hmm.
and he did not mind doing non-hero roles. So he rose very, very quickly, and he had this way of delivering dialogues that will make people clap. Right.
Hmm.
He also had an attitude which worked for him. So he did not mind making even big names in the industry wait for him. He did not mind it. That's just the person he was. Now, Mr. Ghai thought that maybe the route to success is attitude.
Hmm.
So he acquired some of Mr. Sinha's attitude, which totally backfired on him. Okay, in
Yeah.
fact, you would have seen one part where, like many famous movies, the story of Sholay was also doing the
Surely.
rounds.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Sholay doing the rounds
Hmm.
of the industry. Now, not that the fully formed story or full script was doing the round, but the mere concept that there
Yeah.
is a man
Something.
whose family is killed by a dacoit and he gets two criminals to take his revenge. The basic kernel of the story was doing the rounds. And someone informally narrated it to Mr. Subhash Ghai also. But Mr. Subhash Ghai in that phase had acquired Mr. Shatrughan Sinha's attitude. He said, "Oh, I'm not going to do this story," because they had done a story. He had done a movie recently where a group of people go and help a village. They protect a village from a bandit, etc. I said, "There is nothing new in it. I'm not going to do it."
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that he refused Sholay, but I'm just saying that there was this kernel of a story doing the rounds, and because Subhash Ghai had acquired the attitude of Shatrughan, I said, "This is not for me." So, right. So, but they work together very well.
Hmm.
Kalicharan, big hit. Vishwanath, few people know that Vishwanath commercially was more
Yeah.
successful than Kalicharan.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
they did Gautam Govinda, which did not turn out to be a great experience. I think that is where the parting of ways began, not as friends, I will insist, not as friends, not
Hmm.
as persons. They still have family relations. I was at Mr. Ghai's home on the 15th of November because we launched the book at the Mumbai Film Festival. In the evening, I went to his house, and
Hmm.
Mr. Sinha's wife, Poonam, was there at Mr.
Hmm.
Subhash Ghai's house. They remain, one extended family. But I
Okay.
think as colleagues, they began to go their separate ways. And Mr. Sinha, of course, became a big star, and Mr. Ghai became a filmmaker. And also, Mr. Ghai decided to work with a different kind of star cast. So
Hmm.
no longer was he making films where big stars will be required. I think after Krodhi, he moved
Hmm.
away from it. If you look at Vedhata, what is
Hmm.
the genius element of Vedhata? There is no leading man in Vedhata.
Yeah.
Vedhata has a grandfather and a grandson. There is no son in the picture. There is a son, Suresh Oberoi, who dies in the first reel itself.
mm, mm.
So that is Mr. Ghai's genius, that he did away with the requirement of having a big reigning star in his movie. What came after
Yeah.
Vedhata? Hero. Jackie Shroff, at that
Mm,
time, a model, and he had done one, little scene in Swami Dada. Meenakshi Chandri, she had one flop film behind her. That's it. And then you have Amrish Puri and Bharat Bhushan and Sanjeev Kumar and Shami Kapoor. So no
mm.
reigning man, and no Amitabh Bachchan, Dharmendra, Rajesh Khanna, they are not there. So I think I give a lot of credit to Mr. Ghai to help evolve that kind of cinema, which
Right.
could be successful without big stars.
Right. But do you also think that that is the kind of cinema that also kept storytelling, at the forefront?
Yes, absolutely. You have hit the nail on the head because,
Yeah.
as you would see from some of the experience that is narrated, because this book is nothing but the experience of the making of the movies, right?
Mm.
It's less
Yeah.
the story of the man. In fact, there is very little of the man. It's about the making
Yeah.
of the movies. Yeah, so you would see that in some of the experiences of his making movies like Krodhi and Gautam Govinda, etc., you will find that wherever there are big stars involved, the storytelling takes a backseat.
Right.
Back by saying that it takes a backseat, I'm not saying that the story was not being narrated or the movies became bad.
Mm,
What happened was that the stars started to get primacy,
mm,
and
mm.
storytelling did happen, but perhaps not 100% in the way that Mr. Ghai would have wanted to narrate it. In fact, as you read the story of Krodhi in the book, you,
Mm.
it was meant to be a much smaller film. But
Yes.
this star got added, that star got added, and then guest appearance by Miss Hema Malini got added, and songs got added. So Mr. Ghai, the master storyteller, I don't think he was 100% in control of those movies where big stars were involved.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
talking about the later movies, saying Khalnayak, again, big stars. But by that
Mm,
time, Mr. Ghai was Mr. Ghai. He could tell the story exactly as he wanted,
mm.
but not so much in the early years.
Right. If I were to ask you to rate, say, top five films by Mr. Ghai, what would your choices
Oh,
be? Like,
it will
there's
be very
always
difficult.
it's
It will
always
be
hard
very
to.
difficult, but I will give it a shot anyway. But
Right.
this
Right.
is, please understand that this is where my personal biases come in. Okay,
Yeah. Right.
I loved Hero. I just loved Hero. Okay, it was probably came at that time when I was in school, and then I was growing up, and then this Jackie Shroff comes with a different persona, and
Yeah.
and we will come to it in a bit. I have always loved the way Mr. Ghai used songs in his movies. So Hero,
Mhm.
Kalicharan,
Yeah.
Vidhata, Khalnayak, Khalnayak because there is Madhuri Dixit. I always loved her,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I will say, and I will say Pardes because it broke the mold in many ways.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, off the cuff, this would be my, but at the same time, very difficult to pick out five. I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
as much Taal because if you look at Ashwarya Rai in Taal, she just
Yeah.
takes your breath away. That was another gift that Mr. Ghai had.
Right.
Heroines did not look as beautiful as they did in Mr. He just made them look extraordinarily beautiful. If you see that song Tal Se Tal Mila and Ashwarya Rai, it's
Yeah.
raining and she's wearing white. My God, she just takes your breath away. So I love
Yeah.
Tal as well, and you will be surprised that I love black and white. Among his later
Oh.
movies, yeah,
Yeah.
the Black and White is a remarkable movie. Unfortunately, it was not commercially a huge hit. I think it
Yeah.
made money. It was not a blockbuster, not the Subhash Ghai blockbuster. It is a remarkable film in the way it tells the story of a Hindu professor who teaches Urdu, and then he happens to come in contact with a person who raises questions of other kinds. There is conflict, there is drama, and there is storytelling. It's a remarkable movie.
Mm. Right. And then, of course, there is this question about his specific kind of cinema that perhaps
Yes.
also was the need of those decades, perhaps also what perhaps the audience wanted. But if you could give us a sense of what was, as a filmmaker for Mr. Ghai, What was the trigger that sort of that, and also the perhaps some of his influences that you could talk about that
Yeah.
shaped his kind of cinema, that he decided that okay, in terms of technique, in terms of storytelling.
So the first thing was, according to my understanding, the first thing where the process started was Mr. Ghai will say, let's tell a story.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You would have seen this in the book. Most movies started because he got a story, the concept of a story in his mind, and he said, let's tell this story. Right.
Mm,
And influences came from across the world. But the biggest influences were epics. What is Ram
mm,
Lakhan?
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
what is, if you look at Hero, it is the story of a Gunda, but his name
Mm,
is Kishan who plays the flute. It is Krishna Avatar. If you look at many of his movies, they are very strong influences. Look at
mm,
Pardes. The heroine is Ganga, who goes abroad and is faces the risk of getting corrupted, but she reclaims her position as the river Ganga and true love, etc. If you
mm.
look at Karz, by the way, I should have mentioned Karz as one of my five
Yes,
favorite movies.
yes. I was wondering. Yeah,
Karz, yes, it just didn't strike me at that time. How did the
yeah.
story of Karz begin? There was a
Mm,
movie going around at that time, made in Hollywood, called the reincarnation of Peter Proud, right?
yeah,
Which is, so Mr. Ghai happened to see it, and a lot of people think that Kurz is a remake of the reincarnation Peter Peter Proud. I can't tell you how wrong that notion is. There is no similarity between the two movies. What is the Peter Proud movie about? It's about Punarjan. Now, Punarjan as a concept is our concept. It is not
yeah.
Hollywood's concept.
The
It just like
rebirth.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Ghai came to know about the Peter Proud movie and he thought, Arey, Punarjan, great concept.
Mm,
But then he decided to, so that was the skeleton, reincarnation. Then he started to push flesh and bones on it, and clothes and makeup, etc., etc. And characters came in, story came
mm.
in, motives came in. In Kurz, if I mean, you would have seen it
Yeah.
definitely. So
Yes.
the
Yeah.
character of Prem Nath, who's the main villain, Sir Judah,
Yeah.
most unique character. Most unique character because Premnath was known for his dramatic dialogue delivery, and
Yeah.
Mr. Ghai told him that you are not going to speak in my movie. And Premnath was, but are you crazy? I'm known for my dialogue delivery. Mr. Ghai
Yeah.
said, precisely, I want to show you in a way that no one has seen you. So how does he communicate? He's always holding a glass of liquor in his hand. He drums on
Yes.
it with his knuckles, tuck, 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 tuck. And then there is an interpreter, Mac Mohan, who interprets that drumming into words for the other people to understand. Just
Yeah.
imagine the level of characterization that was going on, which is why I keep saying, the degree of creativity that was going on in Hindi film
Right.
industry at that time was unimaginable. And please notice that I always say Hindi film industry, I never say Bollywood, because
Bollywood. Yeah.
Mr. Ghai despises the term Bollywood. Although
Mm,
it's connected to Mr. Ghai, how the term Bollywood was coined, it's connected to him,
mm.
but he does not approve of the term at all.
How is it
So
connected to him?
because it was one of his movie premieres. I think it was Ram Lakhan. Ram Lakhan again broke the mold because it was the kind
Yeah.
of premiere that no one had ever seen, where Mr. Ghai put all the big stars in a bus and they went from theater to theater where the movie was being screened, and they made
Mm,
appearances there. And then I think BBC Channel 4 probably did a documentary about it, where they said that there is this Bombay film industry which wants to be like Hollywood. So then Bombay, Hollywood, Bollywood, that's how the term got coined.
mm.
And Mr. Hayes thinks it's really unfortunate that the Hindi film industry should be called Bollywood. But we were talking about his influences. So Kurz,
Yes.
that's how it happened.
Okay.
Then, if we talk about Pardes, I think Anil Kapoor saw a movie called The French Kiss, which Mr. Ghai has not seen till date. But Mr. Ghai asked Anil Kapoor, what is the film about? He said, the matchmaker gets the girl.
Okay.
The matchmaker gets the girl. Now that line got embedded in Subhash Ghai's mind. The
Mm,
matchmaker gets the girl. Okay. That was also
mm.
the time of crossover cinema. Dilwale
Right.
Dulhaniya had come already. It was and many Dilwale Dulhaniya copycats were coming. I think there was something involving Govinda also. I forget the name, but again they go on a holiday abroad and they fall in love, etc. That kind of thing. Now,
Right.
Mr. Ghai said that how do I make it my movie? So he brought that clash of East and West. Okay, the Western sensibilities, which is taken from a real life. He used to know in real life. He knows a person who's a big in businessman in the US, and who is struggling with teaching Indian values to his family, to his children, etc. So Mr. Ghai thought, okay, so here is my Kishori Lal, Amrish Puri, who wants his son to be, died in Indian values, but the his son is totally American. So how the conflict happens, and then the matchmaker comes in, Shah Rukh Khan, who in the end gets the girl. So that is how influences happen from the smallest of things. A big
Yeah.
movie can be made.
Right. Right. Let us talk a little bit about the music. I mean, most of his films are, in a way, they seem
Amazing.
musicals, even though they may not be technically a musical. Films like Karz, for instance, Taal, Saudagar, and so many others. And he has worked, from a different whole lot of different composers like Lakshmikant
Yes.
Pyarelal, A.R. Rahman, Ismail Darbar, and many others. If you could give us a sense of, how close it is to his heart as a filmmaker, that music should be
Yes.
such in a film, and that he sort of, along with the story, he also takes that aspect into account.
So I will begin by telling you a factoid, which I'm sure you already know because you have read the book.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
talk a bit. Let's talk
mhm,
about the music of Pardes.
yeah,
Who's the music by Nadeem Shravan,
yeah,
right? Now you have heard the music of other Nadeem Shravan blockbusters. Sajan
yeah,
and Ular Kate and all those movies.
yeah.
Listen to
Yeah.
it carefully. You will find that the sounds of Pardes is completely different from every other album that Nadeem Shravan made. Because Nadeem Shravan made the melodies, made the tunes, but the orchestration was done by Subhash Ghai.
Okay.
The music was arranged by Mr. Ghai. That is why, if you listen to Do Dil Mil Rahe Hain, Magar Chupke Chupke, look how minimal the music is. It's a vocal dominated song, right?
Mhm,
It sounds nothing like what Nadeem Shravan used to make, right? The point I'm trying to make is that two things. One, music was deep into Mr. Ghai's heart and mind from the beginning, very deep.
mhm,
Even Kalicharan had major hit songs like Jare Jao Har Jai
mhm,
and those songs. So from the beginning. The second thing is that Mr. Ghai always saw music as part of the movie making process.
mhm,
He never saw it as an appendage, not something that you make the movie that then you insert it into the movie. Never. It was integral to the movie making process. He did story narration sessions with Lakshmikant Pyarelal, with Anand Bakshi. Anand Bakshi not only wrote lyrics, Anand Bakshi would
mhm,
frequently advise Mr. Ghai about the ethos, Indian ethos, etc., etc. Mr. Ghai is so indebted to Bakshi Saab for this, would frequently go to him for all kinds of discussions and will benefit from it. So lyrics, music was integral to Mr. Ghai's movie making process. And where do you see this manifest? You see this in the picturization of his songs. We are talking about a period. See, now most of the songs play in the background. No one,
yeah,
in today's movies, very few movies have characters singing them. It's placed from the background, something else is happening. I'm
yeah,
talking about the
yeah,
70s, 80s, 90s. A song will come, and very often, many people will
mhm,
get up to go to the bathroom, go out for a smoke or something. Song
yeah,
was time for a break. In Mr. Subhash Ghai's movies, if a song started, you could not leave your seat.
yeah. They
Let,
took the
let me
story
give the
forward.
example. Sorry?
They took the story forward in a sense.
They took the story forward. For example, one of my favorite movies, as I mentioned, Hero. There's a
Mhm,
song called Ding Dong, a baby sing a song. Just look at the beauty of simplicity. Ding Dong, baby sing a song.
mhm,
Right.
mhm,
Now, initially, there was a sequence of scenes showing how Meenakshi Seshadri is taken by Jackie and his gang, how they live a life together, where she does little chores and they become friendly, etc., etc. The movie
Hmm.
was becoming too long, unwieldy. The entire storytelling of how they come close is compressed in a song Ding Dong, where
You're right.
again they do things to, it's like a montage.
Hmm.
They are doing various things together at the same time. They are running away from who Meenakshi thinks are criminals, who are
Hmm.
actually the police officers led by Sanjeev Kumar.
Yes.
It's fascinating. The motorcycle tricks, the helicopter, how the scene is changing. The story is moving so rapidly forward. If you get up during the song to go out for a smoke, you will miss vital parts of the movie. You just cannot move. That was the beauty of Mr. Ghai's picturization of songs. It just hooked you because it established characters and it took the narrative forward perhaps more rapidly than some of the scenes did.
Right. So, in two more questions, and then we'll
Sure.
wrap up. One about the story of him being called the showman, and you write somewhere in the book when you have this chapter on Kalicharan and how it marked his arrival as a director, and you write that he was not taking it seriously himself. That he would find even journalists would call him showman. He would say that perhaps they're telling me a show of
Sure.
man or something like that. So
Yes, yes.
so could you give us a sense of what sort of led him being branded as a showman? You write, of course, that the mantle fell on him after Raj Kapoor, whose centenary we celebrated and who is termed as the
Yes.
greatest showman of Indian cinema in a way. So, if you could
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So it started with one big party, which is early on in the book, to
Yeah.
celebrate the success of Hero. Okay. Uh,
Oh, hero. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
success of Hero. I think it was Golden Jubilee of Hero, etc. And there was a
Yeah.
big party, and it
Mhm.
is the party was being held at this same big palatial house that is in the movie also. So in the movie, Shrikant Mathur, the Inspector General of Police, is holidaying with his
Yeah.
family in Khandala, and they have this palatial house. In the same house, Mr. Ghai threw a party to celebrate Hero's success. It was a party that brought the entire industry together. Friends, rivals, Raj Kapoor, Dilip Kumar, the big stars, and even people who did not see eye to eye at that time, like Manmohan Desai and Prakash Mehra, different camps, they all came together as one big fraternity.
Hmm.
What Mr. Ghai also did, again, remarkably, is that he invited every crew member of Hero to the party. The technicians, the spot boys, the light man, everyone was there. It became the talk of the town. It was just the first of many. Like I mentioned, the Ram Lakhan premiere.
Yeah.
India had not seen a premiere like that. Then Mr. Ghai made big movies, some of which started as small movies, like Ram Lakhan was meant to be a small movie because he was coming back from the debacle of Deva, which he had had to shelve. It was a very ambitious project with Mr. Amitabh Bachchan. By the way, it's an untold story. It's the first time that this book is telling the story of what happened with Deva. Neither Mr.
Okay.
Ghai nor Mr. Bachchan has ever spoken about it. First time we
Okay.
get to know in this book. But I'm not going to talk about it here because I want people to read it in the book,
Let the
right?
readers find
But so
out.
yes, let the readers find out. But Ram Lakhan was like Mr. Ghai said, okay, Deva is behind me. एक छोटी सी फिल्म बनाते हैं. That's how Ram Lakhan started. It became a big movie. Saudagar, Khalnayak, big movies. So Mr. Ghai came to be called the showman because he did big things, made big movies, and all his movies, nearly all his movies, were blockbusters for a quarter of a century. But
Right.
that aside, I think the title of the showman, although we use it in the book, I do not think it does justice to Mr. Ghai. He, you would, if you haven't met him, Anjum, I suggest that you meet him someday. You will find what a down to earth person he is. He talks to me like I'm his buddy, not like he is this big guy and I'm just a justice co-author and journalist. We are like, we really are like friends.
Right.
It's so easy to talk to him. It's so easy to relate to him. He
Right.
remains the boy who used to have cycle repair guy and Tonga Walas as his friends here in Old Delhi when he was growing up. Here, retains the same ethos. There is nothing showman about him. His work is a showman's work because big movies, blockbusters, big premieres, international. Mr. Ghai actually took Hindi cinema international
Yeah.
in many ways because his films were running to packed houses in the US. The Roger Ebert Festival was screening his movies and saying, Taal, people, this is a musical like no other. So, in that sense, yes. But to the person, it's unfair to call him showman.
Mm. Very interesting. And also about this, of course, now he has distanced himself from filmmaking. And you write in the afterword, I believe, that, he is in a very happier state of mind, being away from perhaps all of it. Uh, but do you see that, his legacy in some way also, influencing the future generations of filmmakers of Hindi cinema?
Yes, yes. So, one remarkable thing about Mr. Ghai and why I call him so grounded
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that you will never catch him saying things like, हमारे ज़माने में तो ऐसा होता था.
Mm.
He will never say it. और अरे पहले ज़माना तो बहुत अच्छा हुआ करता था. Never. He says that great movies are being made today. They are great filmmakers today. When I went to his house after the launch of the book, there were so
Mm.
many of these young filmmakers who were there. Of course, Imtiaz Ali was there because he was the moderator at the launch of the book, but
Yeah,
many others. And how he relates to them and how much praise and support he has for the young filmmakers of today. In fact, it's there in the book also. He actually quotes names of movies and names of directors who are doing fantastic work according to him. He says,
right.
great. The one thing that you will not find in Mr. Ghai is bitterness.
Mm.
He has no bitterness. He's just so much at peace with himself, with the world. And as he says, अब सुनील गावस्कर इतना अच्छा ओपनिंग बैट्समैन था. By the way, Mr. Gavaskar was there at his home when I went. It was one of the
Okay.
great things for me to meet Sunil Gavaskar. But he
Yeah.
says, अब आज आप सुनील सनी को दे दोगे बल्ला और कहोगे तुम जाओ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में ओपन करो, क्या करेगा? And he says, सनी का जमाना था, मेरा भी जमाना था, हमने अपनी अपनी पारियां खेल ली. अब
Mm.
हमारा समय है when we support others. And Whistling Woods is a key to that, with all its streams and all.
Mm.
Mukta Arts, is a huge sprawling production house, and
Mm.
not only movies but many other things that it keeps doing.
There is a great deal that we learn, from his style of cinema. Towards the end, you quote him, and I would like to conclude on that note that filmmaking
Mm.
is nothing but storytelling. A film should have a
Yes.
new thought, a new emotion, and I think if you look back, most of his films would have that kind of, would be defined by this very thought. And
Yes.
it's a remarkable book of a remarkable man.
Yes.
An era that is perhaps gone, and
Yes.
but there is a great deal of to learn from that era, from those films. Very
Yes.
fascinating for not just uh, those interested in cinema, but also from the craft point of view, and from the point of view of the story of Hindi cinema in a sense.
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you, Suveen. It was really fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.